Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, a few ladies around tonight. Thank you very much for coming, ladies. Gentlemen, thank you very much, and quite pleased to have some of you turn up on this curious event. As indicated in the program, my name is Professor Krishna Gavanda. I'll be the program director for this afternoon. I am the executive dean at the DaVinci Institute. And once again, thank you very much for coming in. And just to sketch the purpose of this afternoon, it's not a conference, not a workshop. It's just all about curiosity and engaging and embarking on this journey, this curious journey of lifelong learning. This is the purpose of it. And Curiosita, from where we get the meaning of curiosity, is one of the 7 principles that underpin the DaVinci Institute, right? So if you go onto our website, you might get more information on what the other 7 principles mean. But clearly, we celebrate each one of the principles by way of events, right? Events where we brag about knowledge generation at the DaVinci Institute. We share with you the successes of our students, like you'll have this evening, and also an opportunity for us to engage with the community and share with you what we can do, what impact we're making out there, etc. I'm sure you're aware that as a higher education institution, the School of Business Leadership at DaVinci is different from the traditional business schools in that we have a big, deeper purpose. We like to make an impact through knowledge generation. All right. Without much ado, I'd like to introduce you to our CEO, Professor Benny Anderson, who will share with us the revised business framework which underpins our workings at the DaVinci Institute. Ben?
Okay, well, welcome everybody. I want to start by way of an introduction and say what we want to share with you today is by no way a concluded piece of work, but it is a reflection on what has developed at DaVinci with the cooperation of a multitude of TT100 companies over the past 14 years. So in some ways, some of you may say, well, that's not much coming out as an output of work with about 1,500 companies over a protracted period. And in some way, I hope that it's got the simplicity that you would find power in the simplistic way that I intend to put this together. But today is about sharing a bit more around the business leadership framework that DaVinci is now busy articulating in a more pronounced way, so that we could hopefully get more work environments to understand what is the unique or so-called alternative business leadership framework that the Institute is embracing as a way to enhance business performance. So I almost want to start off by saying I'm not convinced that people want business to work. I'm convinced that more people go to work because they have a need to be acknowledged and they've got a need to demonstrate a certain power relationship or a relationship of power. And it's more about me telling you and me advising you as opposed to us creating a better understanding of the reality that we are surrounded by. So I'm comfortable in admitting that's an important point of departure. As much as we have a lot of work coming out of the West, particularly the Americas and Europe, about great business models of how we can improve business performance, I often feel that they are very tick box like. So it's like a recipe: 2 eggs, some flour, a pinch of salt, and then you've got the best cake. Well, I've seen that those recipes seem to be problematic. Now, I don't know if it's the tools that we use in South Africa or elsewhere in the world and the oven that you bake these cakes, but they seem just not to have the taste as pronounced by the people who wrote the recipes. So today in sharing is really a start of a journey that we would like to continue even with you, both as faculty, as students. There are alumni here, there are external colleagues, of working with us. I almost want to say, please work with us, because we are very aware that what is happening in the business performance space is not necessarily making the workplace a better place than it was 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 years ago. So the first thing that I would like to start by way of an introduction, and if you wish to, there will be some notes available to the discussion after today, which we will distribute to the people who participated. I want to start off by saying, it seemed to me in terms of core ideas that we have moved from an industrial economy to a creative economy, a world where it's more about intangible services and emerging practices, and importantly so, transparency in changing the work practices. It's not happening, but there seems to be a tendency to work towards this intangible, emerging and transparent practices. In terms of technology, the internet has massified the customization engagement. You can do a lot with a little for 1 million of people, almost immediately. From organizational design and model perspectives, it seemed to me that in the creative economy, it's more about being decentralized and being dynamic. It's not about structure, and it's not about how you can forecast the next 10 years, or how you've got a strategic plan that's got the answers of how you will perform without you actually seeing the reality as it is. It's more about a decentralized dynamic engagement. And the knowledge distribution is not about the specialist anymore, but it is seemingly in the creative economy about a networked professional community of practice. To what extent you and I today feel ourselves being part of such community of practice, that needs to be answered. And I hope that it will emerge out of our discussions. Or are we still believing that somewhere there's somebody who's got the answer, and if they say, then we will trust that and we will follow that. And even if it goes wrong, we will still follow that. From a business ideology point of view, I think in the creative economy, it's all about managing complexity, and to understand the complexity and the necessity to continuous probe, not solve, but probe and sense, and then respond. But continuously to probe, to respond, to sense, and to respond. And hopefully in doing that, that over time we will develop a certain level of mastery in that engagement. Now, the framework that I would like to share with you, and I'm not sure how good am I in creating pictures in your mind, but I almost want you to see it as if you're looking through a cone, a three-dimensional cone, of which at the entry of that, you are looking through a systems lens. And if I say systemic lens, it really means that you would not necessarily be interested in connecting the dots of what emerges on the background of that systemic lens, but that you will have a dire interest, and almost by nature have a reason to collect immediately what you can't see. That's critical. That you will have a sense of collecting of what you can't see, but what is available if you want to see it. I had the privilege of being in Peru with a shaman, and he made a magical comment one day. He said, if you want to be true, if you want to be real in the now, you have to elevate your mind to the level of a condor, so that you can see tomorrow rolling in and yesterday rolling out at the same time. When we look through that multifocal systems lens, do we see that continuity already? Or are we seeing the problems of the past and the challenges of the future? Or are we seeing them as one continuous engagement? Because we collected much more of a perspective than just connecting the dots. So that's an important point of departure. In front of you, when you look through that lens, you could, by way of an analogy, decide that you are seeing 9 dots. And for those of you who are students at the Institute, we ask the question, how do you connect those 9 dots without picking up your hand with 4 straight lines? And it's almost deliberate, because I am messing around with your mind by using the word connect. Because immediately your brain goes inside the blocks, and you try to connect those 9 dots by connecting those 9 dots. But what you should actually do is free yourself from that instruction and collect all the other dots that are possible. And in that picture, you know, you don't only see the 9 dots, but suddenly there are an additional 12 dots which emerges. So when you look through the systemic lens, how do you see the 21? Just as a first glance, there may be many more. As opposed to the 9, how do you see that? And that's a question that you would answer yourself. Am I seeing 9 all the time, or am I seeing 21? You'll know if you see 21, because people won't understand you. So if you feel understood by people, I think you're seeing the 9. And I hope you enjoy that warm feeling of fuzziness, but that won't necessarily take you or me to a next level of engagement. But if you could see the 21 dots, people will not understand, because you made collections which they have not made in their own mind. And the benefit of seeing that better world. The second layer of the 7-layered framework is from a systemic perspective, and this is very much based on the work of Bronfenbrenner, that you not only see the macro system and the microsystem and the mesosystem, but you also see the exosystems. You will see not what is just happening amongst things, but also what is happening outside of things. We tend to be very focused, what is happening between me and Martin? But there's also something happening outside me and Martin, which is happening to me and Martin. And are we aware of that? Are we aware when the CEO makes an instruction in a company that he's also got other relations and other engagements? It's not just the CEO, it's not just the financial director that stipulates what will be the cost planning for the company for that particular season. So how am I sensitized to that exo-system of which you and I all are uniquely different? And to what extent do we introduce or bring that exosystem and engagement into our work or organizational reality? So that's an important non-linear reflection on the systemic perspective, which forms the second layer if you look at the model in detail. Now I want to share, when we started devising this framework, it didn't exist in this eloquence, as uneloquent as it may sound. It only started because we asked companies and representatives of companies, how do you manage your technology? All that tools lying around in your business to enhance your performance. And we only asked them, how do you innovate? How do you make more with less? And then later we asked them, and how do you manage the human interface in managing the technology and the innovation? And we started seeing a triangle emerging with certain interrelationships, certain processes started to take place. And that processes was when we saw companies who were managing their technology fairly eloquently and in a robust manner, and companies who practiced the principles of managing innovation through an ideation process. We saw the emergence of a more agile work environment. People could become more responsive towards so-called changes. People were more energized to take control of their own destiny within that structured work environment. People were not fazed about external controls being impressed on them or attempts to control them, because they were more agile. They had the understanding of what's the core process of ideation, that you don't need to solve a problem on your own and in your own right, but that by probing and taking the awareness of all the energy around us, we will get a solution. I'm still fascinated by the fact that we, in many societies and also in our own society, are still sitting with major, what we will refer to as problems, and we almost define them as intractable problems. I think it reflects our not wanting to manage innovatively. We do not want to probe alternatives. We are not interested in engaging the energies of all the others by which we're surrounded, because we've got preconceived ideas often of who can contribute and who can't contribute. And that directs us. It's almost like the prince that we believed to make believe he had clothes on, but there was no clothes. But he believed he had clothes because the sycophants around him made him believe that he does have clothes. I often feel, are we not trapped as a society and as individuals in that notion that we think we know, but yet we don't know? Because we don't ask, we don't reflect. Because we want to solve and we don't want to probe. So that in the agility space is what we saw emerging. From those entities who were strong in managing their technology and who interfaced with their people in a meaningful way, we saw the emergence of a more engaged, a more aligned workforce. People were able to make a connection to what they are doing and to what is required out there. They made a connection to align themselves, even though it be difficult. May there be challenges, but they were able to make that step change, to align themselves to the reality in an attempt, one, to survive, and to survive in a sustainable way. I will still be intrigued if we as a society, South Africa, could decide to become more aligned, therefore being aware what are the technology opportunities and what are the people realities, and how do we interface that to stay aligned to the realities that's out there. I wonder how will our energy efficiency, and you can interpret that in many ways, as a society look if you could have made that link. We also saw that from the people, companies who had a good people management system and a process going, and the alignment to the innovation management, we saw the emergence of an engaged process. That these people didn't look at the workplace as a boundary, but that they were reaching out to what was unknown to them. They were reaching out to other. Their awareness of other and of context was much more informed and much more pronounced than companies who didn't do that. So they would not be tempted again to work in isolation and to protect all their IP and not to share with other people. So the art of giving became a very important part, Wenzel, in those worlds where you got more solid management of people and management of innovation practices. Now, so those were the three processes which emerged because of these three dimensions or three aspects that we alluded to. And then following that, we realized, but we will have to do some work. So it's all fine to say, well, I'm managing my innovation and I'm managing my technology and I'm managing my people. But what is the next level of detail to ensure that that aligned, engaged, and agile workforce will continue doing what they set themselves out to do? Now, in that sense, we saw the development of we identified certain competencies in that processes of agility, of alignment and engagement. And as related to engagement, I just want to give a little bit of more detail. We saw, and I've alluded to it already in some way, that probing reflective engagements, probing, reflection, became a very critical characteristic, a competency of those companies. Now, I looked at this, and I still remember as part of my own PhD almost 20 years ago, that Dewey already said in 2012, and I want to quote this, he says, "The active, persistent, and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds that support it." So he wrote that reflective practice refers to the active, persistent, and careful consideration of any belief or supposed form of knowledge in the light of the grounds that support it. I'm not sure we're doing that a lot. This was already said in 1910. He continued and said that being reflective enables us to direct our actions with foresight. With foresight. It enables us to know what we are about when we act. So engagement has got a deep sense of awareness of self in the attempt to probe a reflective engagement. The second competency that relates to the engagement process is that of demonstrating social and emotional intelligence. So the ability to connect to self and others in a deep and direct way, and to sense and stimulate reactions and desired interactions is typical competence that emerges from a engaged process. The third competence in that space is cross-cultural engagement, where it relates to an awareness of self in context, and parallel to that the awareness of others within their context, and how those awarenesses will interface and infuse and embrace. Again, I think we see a bit of the emergence of that infusion, but I'm not sure we're seeing enough of it, because I'm not sure that we are interested in actually stepping into each other's worlds as a diverse people. And diversity in this context is not just about racial diversity as we have it in our society. This is about intellectual diversity. It's about many other social dimensions of diversity. It's diversity of sexes, of how we as male and female look at spaces. I don't know whom of you have watched the movies lately, but Roma was a very powerful movie that won some international awards. And it was about this not appreciation of the diversity of who we are as a people. Even Green Book. And I always say, if you go to the movies, it does give you a sense of what is going on in the minds of people. So to what extent are we ourselves part of an engaged process? And to what extent is that engaged process underpinned by how you look at people and how you embrace the notion of being innovative? So on the second process of agility, problem probing is also very specifically emerging there. My sense is that we are so used to a world that wants just-in-time solutions for what is often complex challenges. Again, if I may, I think South Africa has created some just-in-time solutions. We built Medupi, or will we say we're in the process of building Medupi? We created BE platforms, or should I say we're in the process of creating BE platforms? Because we wanted just-in-time solutions for transformation issues. We wanted just-in-time solutions for an energy challenge. In this regard, the notion of problem solving, I believe, tends to become the dictum. Give me the answer now. In appreciating the richness of being agile, knowledge workers or artisans, as I would refer to myself, have the benefit of probing problems, and in doing so, appreciating the non-causal and complex problems of the day. Through cooperative engagements, the knowledge artisan develops the need to rather focus on the experience and the emergence of new insight rather than giving the right answer. Knowledge workers do not have the need to say, I have the answer, but rather it's about what they are seeing and experiencing to create more awareness and insight. When I think of companies or workplaces and I think of the business performance output, I'm not sure we're entertaining this matter. I'm not sure. Kenneth, what do you think?
I think that you're right. We are not exploring it yet.
And maybe it's because we're not ready. Our energy is not ready to actually engage in that matter. But it's sad, because will it hamper our agility? Yes, it will. It will hamper our agility. The second competence on the agile space is about ideation, which in my mind is inclusive of novel and adaptive thinking. I wonder how often are we requested to provide an answer to a complex problem for which we give a non-novel and a non-adaptive response. And I wonder, why do we get trapped in that? I wonder why, with a beautiful neural network, which we call the brain, do we reside to a predefined position of giving an answer that already exists? I'm fascinated with it. I don't know, why do you think does that happen?
I think it's pressure from the environment for you to be able to give it.
Okay, so it's them. So it's not us. So we choose that pressure.
Yeah, we choose it.
I wonder why, Sachal.
Because we get paid for it.
and we must pay the bills.
Of course. So they don't ask in isolation. And there's always a personal agenda also to say if I give the answer quickly, and hopefully the other person will be naive enough not to probe further and accept as is, and then the trade-off happens, you get paid, then you move on. That then becomes somebody else's problem further down the line. Like you said, because you're not perceiving the future and the past at the same time. You've moved on and then somebody else will do it.
I've often seen companies when I was at First Rand, in this regard to your point of pressure, that the most pronounced bonuses were often given to people who were fired in the 6-month period post the bonus.
Yeah.
Charles, what do you think about that? I mean, so at that time, everybody's impressed with the solution. But 6 months later, it emerged that that's not the solution. And then we fire that person. Fascinating for me. Now, related to that is the third competence that we saw emerging, and that's the lack, well, hopefully the idea that people who think transdisciplinary will be less prone to give a quick answer and will be more prone to be more probing and reflective. But it seems to me that all of us sitting here, come from a system where we are embracing either an interdisciplinary or maybe a multidisciplinary engagement with what is out there. What is the best textile? If I look at that in an interdisciplinary and a multidisciplinary way, or I look at it in a transdisciplinary way, it will be totally different. Because in a transdisciplinary way, I'm not just interested in the discipline detail, I'm also interested in the relationship to other disciplines. So I'm looking across the body of knowledge. Even in our own social system, how strong is our textile system? How strong has it grown our textile system in the last 20 years? Katsu? What's your sense? What's your sense? Has it improved? No, it hasn't improved. It went backward. It went totally backward. There are many people, many companies, we struggle to get our own weavers going. But we produce cotton. We even at times export it. Now it sounds similar to what have happened in India. India has damaged its textile industry hugely by not taking a transdisciplinary approach. So we don't look at what is the bigger picture in some way. We just go into and say, well, to the knowledge that we have now, and often it's desktop knowledge by one individual, this is the answer. But we don't look at other ways and other disciplines that may add to that. So from an agile point, the transdisciplinary engagement, the inclusive, novel and adaptive thinking, and the probing are three critical sets of competencies that I believe we should consider and which we would want to promote for people who want to stay as an agile workforce. The last three competencies relate to the alignment process, and the first one is about companies who are in the alignment space, who are successful. One of the competencies that we see there emerging is that they're becoming global and digitally aligned. Small, they may be an emerging company, they may be 7 employees, but they're globally and digitally aligned. They are part of a global community. They, as I would refer to it, as compassionate citizens. There's a small design company in Cape Town, they sit in Silicon Valley and they sit in Stockholm because they are connected to a global network of compassionate citizens around digital engagement. And in doing so, such individuals, I believe, will be able to co-create meaning for probing reflective engagement, and they will cultivate digitally and globally minded solutions. Again, everywhere in the world, what we experience in this society probably has happened in other societies also, because it's also humans staying there. But for some reason, we tend to deal with our challenges as if they're so unique. We are the only unique humans with the only unique needs, which really limits us to consider any alignment to what's happening elsewhere in the world. Because we believe we're really unique. Our ears sit differently and our eyes look differently, and we're just very unique. Well, I think it's largely problematic for alignment. Another competence that we see emerge from the alignment is the application of computational thinking. People functioning in this world reality have the ability to translate vast amounts of data to construct and reconstruct concepts, and to understand database reasoning by applying a combination of both algorithmic and algorithmic principles. I wonder to what extent do we as individuals allow ourselves to allow an algorithmic engagement in staying aligned. Janet?
Explain the word then.
People rhythms. Androrhythmic.
Androrhythmic.
So it's the whole notion of the people energy.
Yes.
Therefore, my gut feeling, my intuition. What is my androrhythm? To what extent do we combine the androrhythm with the algorithm? Or do we just stick to
very poorly. Very poorly.
We rely on data.
Yes. So what will the ultimate impact be on our sustainable alignment if we just stick to data? I can assure you, Eskom will show us all the data sheets for Medupi. But has anybody asked about the water dilemma that has developed in the Lephalale area? Any one of you coming from there? There's major water challenges. Well, the algorithm, you come from there? The algorithm didn't show there would be a problem with water.
They knew.
Well, if they did, why did they continue doing what they did?
Because they wouldn't accept the concept that we would run out of water. They thought they would find a solution before it got to a problem. But they didn't find a solution, but we got the problem. Because nobody wanted to listen. People look at the theories of others, thinking that whatever theories people put down, you must believe. And me personally, I don't believe in theories. I'm one of those that.
But what was interesting that they spoke to communities along, there's a river running close to Lephalale and it runs into a dam. I don't know the detail now. Which one? Yes. They spoke to the smallholding farmers on that river banks, and they told them already like 15 years ago that this is a very sensitive ecosystem. If you overuse this, it will create a devastating effect. They didn't have numbers. And I can imagine that those consultants obviously said, well, these farmers may have a gut feel about this, but this is just, it's just their gut feel. What do they know?
It's your intuition.
It was the intuition, it was the androrhythm.
Correct. But you see, they knew because they had the notion of how they were farming. They knew what they were doing because they work in a cyclical mode. I mean, it's been brought down from generation to generation. It's not written in any book. So if you brought up with it, you've got that feel, you can actually see the ground, it's not being fertile, etc.
So I'll be curious to know how many of these things intuitively are we feeling of what we're busy with? And to what extent are we aware and sensitive how that will influence our sustainable alignment as a workplace? How much things are consultants bringing to your workplace and say, look, we're now going to do a change thing. You all seem a little bit wicked for me. We're going to do a change thing here. And then you will all be fixed. We're going to fix you. And then you will be more aligned? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Sorry, Prof. If you look at it, there's also the element of greed. What am I going to make out of this? By me convincing people to do X instead of Y, which they know to do Y. You see, so a lot of people, and also the education part, a lot of the education we taught gets rid of our intuition. Because we are so clouded with all this gum of what they want us to learn and not what we can actually put on the table ourselves and what we can.
Indeed. Because we must tick a box that you are competent. and you must be competent in what I can understand. All right, so that's just a bit of a diversion there, but just thought I want to talk a little about that algorithm and algorithm, and to what extent do we use the combination of that to apply our computational competence. And I've referred it in this forum before. There's great work of a guy called Geert Lennart on human and technology. He talks about the mega trends for the next 20, 30 years. I think it's an amazing read. And then the notion, what we also saw in companies who are more aligned, is the notion of personal mastery and making sense as the ability to determine the deeper meaning or significance of what is being expressed. This involves the need at individual level to take control of the multitude of existing perspectives regarding reality and to synthesize such and articulate these perspectives so that they make sense to both the individual and in relationship to others. How much of the mastery that you and I may achieve as so-called specialists? So I'm an education specialist, but how much mastery is there of me knowing in relation to the people around me? Because mastery, not being contextually grounded, is actually very, very problematic. And what we've seen in those companies who are more aligned, if they do get to the level of mastery, it is always because of an awareness of the interrelationship between the individual and the group and the multiple levels of it. Now, that's the next layer. So, apart from the systemic lens and the macro and the meso, the micro and the exco perspectives that you look through, and the technology, the management, and the innovation layer, and the related competencies. The next layer, which is the fifth layer, the sixth layer, is the revealing of certain business leadership practices. Now, I said here in the notes the belief that work is a psychological imperative for humans, and as such has the potential to be a noble and a highly gratifying expression of a unique human soul, is central in a systems approach to organizational effectiveness. Not my words, by the work that you know of Elliot Jacques. And I was wondering, when we think of business leadership practices, do we think of the workplace as a highly gratifying expression of your unique soul? Tim? You have been an executive for many years, brother.
Very deep one. I think it makes sense what you say.
But do you think people create the workplace as a uniquely, highly creative thing related to your needs?
I think you do express some of yourself in your workplace, and then the people that work for you can relate to that.
Okay, so, and this is a bit outdated statistics, in 2003, 76% of managers in the US of mid-sized companies went to a medical practitioner. 76% of them. This is 2003. What do you think was the diagnosis? Katerina? Stress. 82% of those 76% were stress related. Which would beg the question, was it a highly gratifying expression of people? And the answer is probably no. We hope as South Africans that we could create that highly gratifying expression of self at work. I still think we've got a lot of work to do. So the need to identify particular business leadership practices following these competencies is an important next level for us to really make sure that we create a sustainable engagement at work. Now, the first one is the practice to co-create meaning. Now, the reason for being should answer the crucial question of existence for both individuals and organizations. Now, in the Japanese, I've got the word ikigai. And ikigai is that reason for being. And we want to believe that if you can create the practice of co-creating meaning. The ikigai, the reason for being of me and the reason of being for Nontokozo, will make it worth being at work. I'm not sure we are creating that amongst each other. And I know sometimes it's challenging. When I engaged with Kenneth last week on a business development activity at the work with a client, there's not necessarily that ikigai relinkages. But how do we at least have the intent to ultimately understand that reason for being and to get to that point in creating a customized solution? What is the real reason for being company X and giving a solution to that? The second practice that we would like to see emerge is the co-creation of direction. Now, you could get direction created by an autocratic, domineering leader like me, who sits in the middle and dictates to everybody. And it can be a strong one. Donald Trump is an excellent example of a very powerful direction. Muammar Gaddafi was a very powerful directive. Robert Mugabe was a powerful directive. The now very successful China had Mao Zedong. I mean, he directed people very, very profoundly. He ultimately killed 40 million of them. That's very direct. But that's not what we're talking about here. This is about how do we, as knowledge artisans, all contribute our vision to co-create direction and have a shared mission.
Do you have an example of that? We've made example of directives.
Yes.
But do we have a successful economy that ran out of we shall all decide together?
All right, I can share with you, if you go to Scandinavia and you go to Denmark and Sweden, and even lately if you go to Finland, the decision to actually take the curriculum out of the schools, do you think it's the government that took that decision? No, it was the community. Could you imagine if we allowed the South African community to decide on the direction of education?
The challenge has always been that what we call the elite will feel that they know a bit more about the dangers that the other group might not. So if we allow everyone to make a decision, they might actually make a detrimental decision.
Well, that's
if we allow democracy in that space.
Well, I still want to say, so how did Finland get to that decision? They allowed everybody to make their contribution. And that's the collective result of the Finns in saying our children will play at school.
They don't have to write exams.
They will play. They don't write exams. They will play at school. Sorry, he just wants to respond.
I'm happy for that. What would be interesting is from that model, how much good decisions do we see out of it, and how many bad decisions do we see out of a collective? Perhaps this one is a good one, but I'm interested to see what happens 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line.
So you have your doubts about it.
Yeah?
You've got your doubts about it.
Probably it's a good decision. But I wonder if all the decisions from a collective.
Before I get to the next question, I want to say I'm less worried whether it's good or bad. I actually don't care.
Okay.
Because no decision is a death sentence. So if it doesn't work, change it. Because we're not God. So except you can see into the future, as the shaman can, but we're unfortunately not at that level of reality. So we can only partially see what we see. And if it doesn't work, change it. But if we change it, there will be less of a finger pointing of the elite and the non-elite, of the known and the not known, of that dichotomy between people. I think if you co-create direction, you break the notion. Wasn't it your Kafure also made comments on that, Marla? Don't you want to share a bit on that? On the co-creation of direction? It's about creating direction without taking the reins.
Yes.
That's almost where we talk about. Now we could say that's true with democracy, but democracy is another almost animal on its own, if I may. Because it's got political tentacles. You know, and stuff. So if we can provide direction without totally taking the reins, then we can co-create a different direction.
But I think it's not about not having leadership and guidance, it's about having a co-creative way of getting to that place. Because I do think that facilitation is an important aspect of it. Because I definitely agree with you that if we don't have any sort of leadership, so that was about that there's a leader who facilitates and guides, but people need to co-create amongst it, so that it feels as if it's also a collective decision, so people buy into the concept.
And it may be difficult for us initially. I just wish we can do more of it. I wish we could say, let us decide on this.
Yeah.
You had a question, right?
It's actually just a comment on the Finnish education system.
Yes.
And that they don't allow private schools in Finland. And the consequence of this is that the parents who would send their children to private schools make sure that the state schools are very good. And that helps the community as a whole.
So what is the context? Why don't they talk about private schools in Finland?
I think
So now give me the system's perspective.
But they're all there's one school system which is each community is very autonomous. Yeah.
Would you describe the Finnish system as the Scandinavian system as more socialist?
I think it is.
It is.
It's more societal, certainly.
And it's more socialist.
Yeah.
It is very social.
Very socialist.
Yeah.
When Lego decided to close down some of their factories in Copenhagen, who do you think took that decision? Not the government, the workers. And where did they rebuild those factories? In Brazil. Because the research showed that there's going to be a huge increase in the population of the Brazilians. Who would they make Legos for? For children. It took a large number of people out of work, but they chose it because the dividends that they would have got made up for them in not having a job, but having the factory in Brazil and still making a good earning. That is co-creating direction.
What about the notion of, which I've seen some countries try and do, first directive and then they let go. Like for Korea, for example, in the 1960s they decided they were autocratic. But later on, when the economy was sort of doing well, then they opened up. They started to globalize and improve competition and the rest of that. But it seems to be a very cohesive process between directive and cooperative.
Could you give me an example in Africa where that's starting to happen?
Where that's starting to happen?
Yes. Rwanda.
Yeah.
Very much
Kagame took a very much autocratic view.
Yes.
Professor Krishna was there.
Yes.
But now the system is starting to emerge.
Yes.
You had a comment, Janet?
It was just a comment, and again, it's just to remind us all that we have to think about this systemically. So you can't look at this co-creation of direction as an island. We have to look at it in the context that we're probing together, and we're doing computational thinking together. So those are the elements that support that kind of leadership.
But I wish we can see the emergence of a more co-created direction as a business leadership practice. The third business leadership practice is the facilitation of conversation. Jennings, just to quote Snet, conversation is the most powerful learning technology ever invented. Conversations carry news, create meaning, foster cooperation, spark innovation. Encouraging open, honest conversation through workspace design, setting ground rules for conversing productively, and making conversations into the corporate culture spread intellectual capital, improve cooperation, and strengthen personal relationships.
I think that's a problem in South African people. So people are scared to have an open, honest conversation.
You don't think it's a language problem?
No, I think you can articulate what your view is on certain things, but you're scared you might get fired. So, I think we could improve there, definitely in the country.
But somewhere we must make a call as business leaders on the practice of conversation. We must make a decision. If it is that conversation is such important technology, which I believe, why don't we use it more? And maybe it's because of our own dysfunctionality that we don't. But at least I think we must be more aware of what that could do, what it could do to decision making, to commitment, and many other things. The fourth practice,
Ben,
yes.
The conversation is, if you look at,
if you're looking at the millennials, conversation is now social media. It's not verbal, it's now digital. And how will that impact going forward? That's a very real thing to consider on that end.
Okay, so I'm running over my time, so
Yeah,
I'm just
it's
going
quite
to.
interesting, but it's run way past.
I'm just going to give you the fourth practice is engaging creative networks, and you can look at the notes later on because I want to get to something else, and to promote experimentation and to celebrate accomplishment and to build vitality. So those are the 9 business leadership practices, if you look at the model later on, that we would like to see building onto the competencies. And then we are seeing if those things start to connect. You can see the emergence of 3 workplace realities, where the energy engagement and the social interaction result in either one of the 3. Either you become more coordinated and you make more rules, and you say, this is how it works, stuff you. Just do your job. The downside of that is, if I die tomorrow and I was the instructor, you also die tomorrow. Because you've got no competence. You don't know how to engage. So the system dies and implodes. If there's more energy flow and there's more social interaction, you see a collaborative engagement. And I've found too much collaborative discussions in the last 2-3 years. People boast about their collaborative engagement. Well, I'm very happy for you, but to me it's actually very dangerous. Because in a collaborative engagement, you're still dependent on somebody orchestrating it from a central point. So don't speak to me how you collaborate with somebody else. If you want to collaborate with me, you're almost insulting me. I will cooperate with you, which means there will be full flow of energy. You'll take all the ramifications and benefits, and there will be full flow of social interaction, and you will take all the ramifications and benefits. In that cooperative space, there's nobody dictating in the center. But the energy flow is a sense of giving. So I work with Wenzel because I want to give of myself, not because I want to take anything. Now, I'm very aware that in workplaces, in my own company, we experience it in business, you may have moments of coordination and collaboration and cooperation. But what I do hope to establish is that the overarching business reality, emerging from all of these competencies and practices, will be one of cooperation. Thank you very much. I'll take one last question, then we go to the next speaker.
Well, now we're moving into the field of digitization, but I think you need to be very wary because digitization can be controlled by Big Brother. So if we get to a point where they don't want anything to happen with that, they will block it somehow. They will come in and create obstruction in getting the information over. Because they can accumulate and see where we're going and redirect.
Well, it's all possible, but if the energy flow of cooperative engagement is powerful, I think we go to the same job. Is powerful, then the need to coordinate from that point will be very, very limited. There will be attempts to it, but it will be very limited. Because the energy flow will not allow that.
Well, we hope so.
All right, thank you very much, Ben. I think you deserve a kind of talk. Thank you very much.